This video is regarding the very basics of solving an equation. This is to try to strengthen some of our skills regarding solving all sorts of equations in one or more variables. We're going to start with some of the very basic ideas here. The most basic idea to understand about solving an equation is that it relies on your understanding of inverse operations. What I mean by inverse operations is you need to know which operations undo each other. For example, if I have the operation plus 5, the inverse of that operation would be to subtract 5. And that's because plus 5 minus 5 equals 0, or nothing. Similarly, if I had an operation where I were multiplying by 4, the inverse operation would be to divide by 4. Because 4 divided by 4 will bring you back to 1, will bring you back to your original. Everything that we do when we solve an equation relies on those inverse operations. The other very important idea regarding equations is that an equation is balanced. In other words, to have an equal sign in the middle of two expressions is to say that the expression on the left, the x, weighs the same or is the same as the expression on the right, the 4. This is my starting equation. I know that it is currently balanced because the two sides are equal. If I were to take that equation and add 4 to the right hand side, but not the left hand side, now I would have something where x equals 8, but this is no longer balanced. My original equation, x equals 4, told me that x was 4. That's something that cannot be changed. That is a balanced equation. When I added 4 to the one side of the equation without the other side, I totally changed the equation and wrote something very, very new. I unbalanced my equation. So this was a really bad idea, and it left me with a really bad result. Instead, what I should have done, if I wanted to add 4 to the right hand side, I also needed to add 4 to the left hand side. So the new equation that I would have would be x plus 4 equals 8. Now, on the left hand side, I wrote x plus 4. And I wrote x plus 4 because x and 4 are not like terms. X is a variable and 4 is just a constant. On the right hand side, on the other side of the equation, 4 plus 4, since they are like terms, equals 8. This equation has remained balanced because I've added 4 to both sides, and if I wanted to get back to the original, I could. To prove that point, let's take a look at this equation, x plus 4 equals 8. The goal in an equation is typically to isolate your x, to get x by itself, to have a result where you have x equals on one side of the equation and nothing else on the other side of the equation. Currently, I have plus 4 on the same side as the equation as the x. So I'm adding 4. So I go back to what I mentioned earlier, and the inverse operation of adding 4 is to subtract 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 from the left-hand side or your right-hand side of that equation. Now, what I do to one side, I have to do to the other in order to keep the equation balanced. So since I'm subtracting 4 from the left-hand side, I also need to subtract it from the right-hand side. I combine my like terms. Positive 4 and negative 4 do cancel. They make 0. 8 minus 4 gives me 4. So now I'm back to the original equation that we started with, x equals 4. Similarly, suppose that I start with an equation 4x equals 12. Keep in mind that this equation is balanced because it isn't equal to. And 4x is actually the same thing as 4 multiplied by x. So again, remembering my result that I want x equals by itself on one side of the equation, I need to make the multiplied by 4 go away. Well, the only way to make the multiplied by 4 go away is if I divide by 4. Now, a simple way to divide by 4 in this case would be to write 4 in a denominator, because it's the same thing as dividing by 4. Now, whatever I do to one side, I still need to do to the other in order to keep my equation balanced. So 4x over 4, 4 divided by 4, does reduce to equal 1x. 12 divided by 4 equals 3. Now, of course, 1x is actually the same thing as just x, so my final equation would be x equals 3. This equation is still balanced, and now I know that 3 is my value of x. If I were to take that value and go back to my original, 4 times 3 is 12. 12 equals 12, so I can check the equation. Everything's been balanced, and everything I've done has been a legal algebra move.